I don't think there was a single moment in my childhood when I wasn't gently reminded that I came second. Not in a dramatic way, no family meeting where they spelled it out for me. Just a slow, quiet drip. 1,000 tiny instructions, glances, decisions that all whispered the same truth. My younger sister Brooke was the one who needed more. More attention, more understanding, more forgiveness. And I was the one expected to give it. If she broke something of mine, my mother Diane would look at me and sigh. "She's younger, Catherine. Just let it go." If Brooke threw a fit over a toy I was using, Diane wouldn't scold her. She'd turn to me almost gently and say, "You know how she gets. Just let her have it." Even when I didn't want to, I did, because I was older, because I knew better, because they made sure I understood that Brooke's emotions mattered more than fairness. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing I need people to understand. It wasn't one massive betrayal. It was the slow, careful construction of a world where my needs were always optional. The pattern started early and never changed. It just grew more complicated as we grew older. What began as toys and tantrums turned into expectations and rules that were never equally applied. I wasn't just the older sister, I was the buffer, the fixer, the one who could take it. And in that quiet, daily sacrifice, I started to disappear. I never screamed about it. I didn't rebel or throw things or demand to be seen. I adjusted. I learned to move around Brooke's moods like she was a force of nature. I learned how to offer silence when I wanted to speak, how to give in before it became a fight, how to smile when I didn't win. And the worst part is, I believed that made me strong. I carried that belief with me into adulthood, into every choice I made, into how I measured my worth. That if I could just keep things calm, carry the weight without complaint, they'd see me differently. They never did. By the time I turned 16, that quiet understanding had become law. If I wanted anything beyond the basics, a phone, decent clothes, a chance at independence, I had to earn it myself. So I found a weekend job, then after-school shifts. I stocked shelves, wiped tables, ran registers. I worked because no one else was going to give me anything, and I learned early not to ask. But when Brooke turned 16, it was different. She didn't apply for jobs. She didn't even pretend to care about money. On her birthday, Rick, our father, handed her car keys, and Diane handed her a credit card. "Just focus on your studies, sweetheart," my mother said, brushing Brooke's hair behind her ear like something out of a commercial. "We'll handle the rest." That was the phrase that never made an appearance in my life. We'll handle it. For college, I applied for every scholarship I could find. I still came up short, so I borrowed. I rented the cheapest room I could find. I ate boxed pasta 5 nights a week and worked 2 part-time jobs just to stay afloat. I was tired in a way I didn't know how to explain because no one ever asked. Brooke, meanwhile, got into a private university. Not just tuition, but housing, groceries, utilities. Everything was covered by Diane and Rick. She lived in a sunny off-campus apartment with white curtains and a balcony, and never once had to skip a class because she was working a double. And when I asked Diane about it just once, gently her response was calm and simple. "Brooke isn't as strong as you, Catherine. She needs more support." That line was the spine of their logic, the foundation for every unequal choice. It didn't matter how much I struggled. What mattered was that I could survive it. And I did. That was the problem. When Brooke ran out of money, they bailed her out. When she totaled her car, they replaced it. When she maxed out her credit card buying things she didn't need, Rick paid it without even frowning. When I was hit with a surprise medical bill, urgent, terrifying, I called home heart-pounding, thinking maybe just this once. Diane sighed and said, "I wish we could help, honey, but things are tight right now. You'll figure it out." I always figured it out, and they always let me. Eventually, I stopped asking, not just for help but for attention, for care, for acknowledgement. I stopped expecting to be anyone worth worrying about, and somehow that made things easier for them. When Dan Myers proposed, I didn't cry. I laughed, not because I didn't care, but because I hadn't expected anyone to choose me with that kind of certainty. It was a quiet moment, just the two of us on a rainy afternoon, and somehow it felt like I was finally being seen. For the first few weeks, I lived in that warmth. Planning the wedding felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. A life where I could be the center of something without guilt. But as the date drew closer, something shifted. Subtle at first. Diane, my mother, started sighing in that practiced way of hers. Every time we mentioned the cost of catering or flowers, she'd tilt her head's soft voice just slightly too measured. Weddings are so expensive these days. It's such a shame really spending that much on just one day. She wasn't trying to talk me out of it. She just wanted me to feel guilty for being celebrated. Rick, my father, was quieter but no less precise. "We've been making some sacrifices lately," he said one evening, looking over his glass of wine. "Things aren't as easy as they used to be. But you know we do what we can. Brooks had a rough year." I didn't say anything. I just nodded the way I always had. But something in my chest tightened, and Brooke made no effort to hide how she felt. She rolled her eyes whenever the wedding came up, made loud comments about how ridiculous bridesmaid dresses were, scoffed when anyone mentioned a registry. She even joked that I was acting like a princess when I cried during a cake tasting. But what cut deepest was the look on her face whenever someone gave me their full attention, like my happiness was a threat, like my joy was stealing oxygen she thought belonged to her. Dan noticed first. One night while I was obsessing over the seating chart, he stood across from me, arms folded, watching. His voice was calm, but the edge in it was new. "They're going to pull something," he said. I looked up. "Who your parents?" he said simply. I shook my head, tried to laugh. "Dan, come on! They can be selfish, sure, but it's our wedding. They wouldn't ruin our wedding." He didn't answer right away, just watched me steady. Then he reached for his jacket, pulled out a sealed white envelope and set it on the table. Just in case, he said. I didn't ask what was inside. I just looked at it. And for the first time, I wondered if Dan was right. The morning of the wedding felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you think maybe, just maybe, things might go right. The sky was clear. The florist arrived early. My dress fit like it was always meant for me, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe I was allowed to have something beautiful. Diane greeted me with a warm smile and a cup of tea as if we did this all the time. She smoothed my hair like she used to when I was 5. "You look lovely, Catherine," she said. "Truly." Even Brooke held back. She didn't roll her eyes, didn't sigh. She barely said anything at all. I took it as progress. The ceremony was soft, and full vows spoken through held breath eyes glistening in the light. The air was thick with roses, champagne, and something I hadn't known I'd been waiting for quiet approval. My mother clapped during the toasts. My father danced with me. Brooke sat near the window and didn't complain when the music got loud. It was everything I hadn't known I wanted, a moment where I wasn't just tolerated, I was seen. And then there was the card. I found it just before walking down the aisle, tucked into my bouquet. A small ivory envelope with my name in Diane's handwriting. Inside was a short message. "No matter what today, you are our daughter, and you are loved. Mom." It was vague, simple, but somehow it broke something open. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she saw me. Not as Brooke's shadow, not as the strong one who never asked for anything, just me. So when the music played and the room spun with people I loved, I let myself fall into the illusion. I smiled so hard my cheeks ached. I danced until my feet throbbed. I held Dan's hand like a lifeline. I told myself I'd been wrong to worry. They'd changed. They had to have changed. Because surely no one would pretend so perfectly just to tear it all down. It happened just after the first dance. The band had taken a short break. The room had quieted into conversation and soft clinks of glass. I was still warm from the music, a little breathless cheeks flushed from spinning with Dan beneath the lights. That's when Diane touched my arm. She was smiling too brightly, the kind of smile that meant she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't like, but thought I might accept anyway. "Come with me a moment," she said, voice gentle, hands light. I followed her to a corner near the bar, away from the guests, where the candles flickered low. She took my hands in hers and squeezed them like she had something beautiful to share. "You look radiant," she said, almost in a whisper. "It's a lovely evening." I waited. The pause wasn't casual, it was deliberate. Then she leaned in, her voice soft enough that no one else would hear. "We're keeping your gift money. Brooke needs it more than you do." For a moment I couldn't speak. I thought maybe I'd misunderstood, that she'd said something else entirely, something harmless. But the way she kept smiling like she'd just handed me a blessing told me I'd heard her exactly right. "I'm sorry," I asked finally. She sighed like this was difficult for her. "Sweetheart, you don't need it," she said. You have Dan now. You're building a life together. Brooke's struggling and it's only fair that she gets a little help." My fingers had gone cold. The hum of the reception blurred into a low drone behind me. I was still holding her hands and I hated that I hadn't pulled away yet. "That money wasn't yours to touch," I said. My voice came out low, flat. Diane blinked just once. Her smile didn't drop, but something in it tightened. "We're your parents," she said like that explained everything. "In this family we help each other." That was when I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't temporary blindness or a lapse in judgment. This was exactly what she believed, that I was a resource to be tapped, that Brooke's needs would always outweigh my own. And even here, even on my wedding day, my joy, my celebration, my moment, she still expected me to hand it over, just like I always had. I didn't know he was standing behind me until I heard his voice. It was quiet, measured, but there was something in it that made the air go still. "Good thing we planned for this," Dan said. I turned. He was calm, hands in his pockets, eyes steady on Diane. Not angry, not surprised, just ready. Her smile faltered just slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked, still holding on to her expression like it might shield her. Dan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope. The one he'd given me weeks ago, the one I hadn't opened. He held it between two fingers and extended it to her like an offering. "Go ahead," he said. "Open it." Rick had joined us now. He stood just behind Diane, arms crossed, jaw tight. His eyes narrowed at Dan like he was sizing him up, but said nothing. Diane hesitated, then took the envelope with carefully practiced grace. She slid a nail beneath the flap and pulled out a stack of papers. I watched her scan the first page. Her hands didn't shake, not yet, but I saw the stillness in her face, the tightening around her mouth, the way her breath caught halfway through the second paragraph. Rick leaned in to read over her shoulder. I saw his brow crease. "What the hell is this?" he asked. Dan's voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. It's a notarized legal declaration," he said. "Signed 3 weeks ago. It states that all wedding gifts, monetary or otherwise, are legally the property of Catherine and me." Diane blinked. Dan continued. "Any attempt to withhold, redirect, or access those funds without our consent constitutes theft and will be prosecuted." The silence after that was thick enough to choke on. Diane looked at me now, not with sweetness, not with that gentle condescension, but with a flicker of something I hadn't seen in her before. Uncertainty. "You wouldn't take us to court," she said, barely above a whisper. "We're family." Dan smiled, small, controlled. "Oh, I would," he said. And he would. I could see it in the way he stood. Not defiant, not angry, just unwavering. He had drawn a line and he would not let them step over it. Rick's mouth opened, then closed again. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For once, I wasn't the one explaining, defending, or softening the blow. I just stood beside my husband and let them sit with the reality they'd never expected, that they had pushed too far, and that someone was finally pushing back. The silence didn't last long. Brooke stepped forward, her heels clicking too sharply against the floor. Her face was flushed lips, tight eyes wide with disbelief. She looked between the envelope in Diane's hand and the unreadable expression on Dan's face. Then she cracked. "This isn't fair!" She shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're married now, Kate. You don't even need that money. You have a husband, a future everything, and I have nothing." Her voice rose higher with every word, each sentence more breathless than the last. "I'm struggling, and you don't even care." I didn't answer. I just watched her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel shock. I felt something colder, because in that moment it hit me she meant it. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't being manipulative. She wasn't throwing a tantrum to get her way. She truly deeply believed that she had a right to what was mine, to the money, to the moment, to anything I had that she didn't, because that's how it had always been. Her pain, real or imagined, mattered more than my boundaries. Her struggle, self-inflicted or not, was always more urgent than my stability. I'd spent years hoping she'd grow out of it, that one day she'd wake up and realize she wasn't the center of the universe, that she'd stop asking, that she'd finally learn to carry her own weight. But as I watched her now, Shoulders trembling, fists clenched, tears streaking her face like a child denied dessert. I knew the truth. She was never going to change, and I was done waiting for her to. Rick stepped forward so fast it startled even Diane. His face was red, his mouth tight, eyes hard as stone. For a moment he looked like he might explode not just with anger but with something deeper, something wounded. "I have never been so ashamed of you," he spat. "Not in my life. I didn't move. I didn't flinch, didn't fold, didn't look away." I met his eyes, steady calm, the way I had never dared to before, and let his words hang in the air like smoke that no longer choked me. The shame he was trying to hand me didn't fit anymore. I didn't say it out loud, but the silence between us said enough. "You don't get to be ashamed of the daughter you never protected." Dan took a step closer, his voice low but sharp like a blade that didn't need to be lifted to draw blood. "If you try to take 1 cent from us," he said, "we will see you in court." There was no heat in his voice, no anger, just certainty. And that's what made it land. Diane's lips parted like she might say something, but no words came. Brooke let out a frustrated sob behind her, but no one turned to her now. Even Rick said nothing more, because for the first time they understood the math had changed. There would be no pleading, no compromise, no playing on guilt or history or the 1,000 quiet ways they'd trained me to fold. There was only a daughter who didn't need their approval, a husband who would stand beside her, and a line they would not cross again. We walked away without a word. The music behind us had picked up again, strings and soft laughter trying to fill the space that had cracked wide open. But to me, the hall felt hushed, as if the air itself knew something had shifted. Dan's hand was warm in mine, steady, certain. My spine lengthened with each step. I didn't glance back. I didn't need to, until I felt her fingers close around my wrist. The grip was too familiar, tight but trembling. "Catherine." My mother's voice was small, barely more than a breath. I turned. She looked unrecognizable. Her eyes were wide, her composure gone. The practiced grace she'd worn like a second skin for decades had fallen away. What was left was a woman unraveling. "You don't mean this," she whispered. "We're your family?" I didn't answer right away. For once, I let the silence settle on her shoulders. I let her sit in it, the weight of her words, the hollowness behind them. I let her feel the truth she had never wanted to see. Then I spoke, not loud, not cruel, just steady. "You were never my family," I said, tilting my head. "You were Brooke's." Her face went still, like the words had struck her across the mouth. Her hand dropped from my wrist as if it had been burned. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The collapse wasn't loud, it was quiet, almost invisible. But I saw it all. I saw the way her shoulders slumped, the way her fingers twitched as if trying to grab something that had already slipped through, the way her eyes flicked to Dan, not with anger now, but with disbelief. She had never imagined this moment, not once. She'd always assumed I'd circle back, that no matter what they took, I'd come home eventually. But this time I wasn't walking away in silence. I was walking away with everything I had built on my own, and I wasn't leaving the door cracked. We kept walking, step by step, breath by breath, away from the people who had once called themselves my family. Behind us, the reception hummed faintly, laughter-clinking glasses music, a soundtrack for someone else's version of the day. Not ours, not anymore. And then I heard it. The scuffle of hurried footsteps, the sharp whisper of a breathless voice. "Catherine, please." It was Diane again, her words chasing me, desperate now. I didn't turn around. Behind her, Brooke's voice climbed into a shriek. Something about how I was ruining everything, how she deserved better, how I had stolen the spotlight. Then came Rick, low and furious, cursing under his breath, no longer trying to hide his rage, only trying to hold together whatever pride he thought he still had. It all came at once. The pleading, the outrage, the fury, a perfect storm of the old pattern. Except this time I wasn't standing in the middle of it. I didn't turn around, not to Diane's cracking voice, not to Brooke's tantrum, not to Rick's bitterness, because they weren't speaking to me. They were speaking to the version of me they had created, the one who apologized, who sacrificed, who stayed. But she didn't exist anymore. That girl, the one who waited her whole life to be seen, to be chosen, she had finally chosen herself. Dan squeezed my hand once, quiet, solid, present, and that was all I needed. I walked on, past the voices, past the wreckage, past the years I had spent begging for scraps. I didn't need a final word. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need closure. Some things end not with confrontation, but with a silence so final it leaves nothing behind. And in that silence, I found a peace. There is no next section. This is where the story ends. No confrontation, no revenge, just a woman who finally walked away. Forever.